Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Some of Jeremy Corbyn's closest allies have been accused of interfering in the independent investigations into allegations of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. The BBC's Panorama programme has seen emails which suggest the party's General Secretary attempted to interfere in the selection of a disciplinary panel and that the Labour leader himself was copied into the correspondence. Labour has rejected the claims, saying they come from disaffected staff. Here's our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
They might not call me a dirty Jew, but they'll call me a dirty Zionist.
Labour members abused by others.
I do not think the Labour Party is a safe space for Jewish people anymore.
Meant to be their friends, their party comrades.
Labour isn't now an anti-racist party.
Was the party they loved, the party he leads, doing enough to protect them?
I say this to all in the Jewish community. We are your ally.
Jeremy Corbyn always vowed he'd do everything he could. Tonight, accounts from 7 former officials from Party HQ give a different impression. Emails from Mr Corbyn's senior team on controversial cases.
So I'm Jackie Walker.
Jackie Walker, a prominent Corbyn supporter, was being investigated for comments she made about Jews. The case was referred to the NCC, the party's independent complaints panel. But an email last year from Labour's top official, Jenny Formby, a close ally of Mr Corbyn, said the NCC cannot be allowed to continue in the way they are at the moment. I will also be challenging the panel for the Jackie Walker case.
Friends, comrades, thank you.
Later in the correspondence, it appears she is aware what she's suggesting is dubious. She goes on to ask the others to switch to a different email address, adding, "I've permanently deleted all trace of the email. Too many eyes still on my Labour address." Labour says Jenny Formby temporarily stopped using her party email because of concerns a political opponent had access to it. Crucially, the correspondence was copied in not just to Mr Corbyn's most senior aides, but to the leader's own private email. Labour says the emails are simply about holding the complaints panel accountable for the length of time they take to hear cases and protecting the party against any successful legal challenge on the basis of perceived bias if the same panel's used in high-profile cases. The man who was in charge at Party HQ for years is Ian McNicol.
The emails that you've shown me are really important. The issues that are raised within them should ring alarm bells across the party. To try to interfere politically within the NCC is just wrong.
The people that she brought in when she became General Secretary overruled us and downgraded what should have been a suspension to just an investigation, or worse, to just a reminder of conduct, effectively a slap on the wrist.
Again, Labour rejects those suggestions. But in another email, Seamus Milne, one of Corbyn's closest advisers, asked for a review of the disciplinary process looking at anti-Semitic complaints. There was a risk, he wrote, of muddling up political disputes with racism. Sam Matthews was officially in charge of handling complaints.
This was the leader's office requesting to be involved directly in the disciplinary process.
The party told us this was not a request for any kind of formal review to take place, adding, "The leader's office did not intervene. These former disaffected employees sought the view of staff in the leader's office, which was complied with in good faith. These disaffected former officials include those who've always opposed Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, work to actively undermine it, and have both personal and political axes to grind." Jeremy Corbyn attracted thousands and thousands of new members to Labour, but the number of allegations of racism against Jews grew too, a stain on his success rebooting the party. By spring, there was a backlog of 1,000 complaints, only 15 expulsions. Many staff overwhelmed quit, including a Jeremy Corbyn backer, breaking legal agreements to keep them quiet, says Speak Out Tonight.
It was so prescriptive in not speaking about anything that I had heard of or happening in the Labour Party. But I won't be able to live with myself unless I speak up about the horrendous things that I know have been happening.
The thought crosses my mind as to whether I send her my resignation and then do something that nobody should ever consider. and that I actively considered committing suicide.
Labour's promised again and again to take this poison out of the party.
We will do all we can to make it very clear to anybody who thinks that they can have those abhorrent views in our party and in our family that they are not welcome.
Shame on you! MPs and members of the Lords have quit in protest already. Many party members have left. And if Labour can't get a grip on racism in its own ranks, what might they lose next?
And you can see more on that story tonight on Panorama on BBC One at 9 o'clock. Well, let's try to sum all this up with Laura. Laura, Labour dismissed the Panorama claims, but surely this must add to the pressure on Jeremy Corbyn.
It will, George. I mean, Labour completely reject the allegations that have been put forward tonight. They claim that the staff who have spoken out are disaffected. They are very suspicious about the motives of people who have given their own accounts of what went on during their time working for the party. It's worth saying that Jeremy Corbyn was asked to give an interview for the programme, but he declined to give a defence or to put his side of the argument. There has been such deep alarm in parts of the Labour Party and, of course, the wider Jewish community in particular about what's been going on. And the evidence that is put forward tonight will only serve to heighten that. One senior Labour figure, Lord Faulkner, who was asked to look into the claims of anti-Semitism by Jeremy Corbyn, has said this paints a picture tonight of a party that's still in denial, years on, still failing to get a grip with this serious problem.
Laura, on our lead story, the diplomatic row, how challenging is all this for Boris Johnson?
Well, it's been a day of turmoil everywhere, hasn't it? I mean, Boris Johnson is widely expected to be moving into number 10 a fortnight today. And if you like, these events are the first act of a hypothetical Johnson premiership, even though his team would contend whether or not Sir Kim made his mind up just to quit because of what Boris Johnson said, or more pointedly didn't say in that debate last night when he wouldn't give him his explicit backing. It is not, of course, unheard of for independent civil servants and officials to get caught up in a political row. But this is on a different kind of scale. And this saga suggests that the convention that our country and our country alone chooses our ambassadors is something that is at risk here. And that is a serious convention to ignore. Something that many people in Westminster believe we shouldn't just give up without a backward glance. And a reminder for Boris Johnson too, that while his friendship with Donald Trump might be an advantage for him in some ways, it will also be a very big political risk.
Laura, thank you very much.
In the struggle for party unity, it's fair to say that both the Conservatives and Labour are looking something less than monolithic right now. And for the opposition, an enormous amount of the political energy has been absorbed by ongoing accusations of anti-Semitism. Tonight, Panorama featured leaked emails and testimony from several former members of Labour's dispute team, the internal body investigating more than 1,000 allegations of anti-Semitism. Here's a clip where two of the whistleblowers who spoke to Panorama discussed the involvement of the Leader's Office and of General Secretary Jenny Formby in how these cases were being investigated.
This was the Leader's Office requesting to be involved directly in the disciplinary process. This is not a helpful suggestion, it is an instruction without needing to say it.
It's a joke. On a number of cases which I worked on, the people that she brought in when she became General Secretary overruled us and downgraded what should have been a suspension to just an investigation, or worse, to just a reminder of conduct, effectively a slap on the wrist.
The Labour Party didn't want to come on Newsnight to talk about this, but in a statement they said the allegations were deliberate and malicious misrepresentations designed to mislead the public. In another clip from the programme, Shadow Secretary of State for Local Government Andrew Gwynn responds to questions about whether party leader Jeremy Corbyn is himself anti-Semitic.
I don't believe that Jeremy Corbyn is anti-Semitic. I know Jeremy, I've known him for 14 years, and he is a passionate believer in equality, in ensuring that hatred and intolerance in wherever it manifests itself is tackled and is challenged. And so, no, I don't believe that Jeremy is anti-Semitic.
Well, to discuss what today means for the Labour Party, we're joined by the former Lord Chancellor, Lord Charles Faulkner. Welcome.
Thank you.
The chairman of the Jewish Board of Deputies has said tonight, in response to the programme, that the present leadership of the party has turned a once great party into a cesspit of anti-Semitism. Do you think that's over the top?
Well, it's a very depressing film. I watched it just before I came today, and the two things that struck me watching it were, first of all, how hellish it was for so many people who were Jewish to be in the Labour Party, and secondly, how dysfunctional the disciplinary process either is or had become at the time the people who were talking were describing it. So you've got a dreadful atmosphere for people who are Jewish and a disciplinary process that doesn't appear to be doing anything about it.
Now, this, of course, is a running story, and at one point you were called in to audit their effectiveness of their response to complaints of anti-Semitism. What on earth has happened to that?
I stepped back at the moment the Equalities Commission stepped forward, because they were going to do and are doing a full audit and investigation of what the Labour Party are doing. I also had in the back of my mind the thought that the fact that there was a external force with statutory powers of subpoena and things like that to look at all the information, that would itself bring some improvement in relation to it. But since the appointment of the Equalities Commission, or their accepting the investigation brief, we've had the Williamson case, where the reinstatement of Williamson, even though it looked on the face of it like he had been siding with anti-Semitics. And it wasn't just the reinstatement, it was a decision that he wouldn't be referred to a disciplinary tribunal. And we've had the Wilsman case, somebody on the ruling body of the Labour Party who said all or most of these complaints of anti-Semitism were being whipped up by the Israeli embassy, and he remains suspended, but the process goes nowhere.
They clearly argue they weren't being anti-Semitic. Can I just ask you about one of the things...
They do, but that's a fair point to make, but surely the important thing is that they be dealt with quickly, so that the people we saw in the programme this evening, the members of the Jewish community who are members of the Labour Party, would feel there's some obvious response from the party to anti-Semitism, because the worry about an institution like the Labour Party is if the institution doesn't respond properly, then you worry that there is institutional anti-Semitism.
So for people who didn't see the programme, as you say, there were Jewish members of the party. There were also several members of the team investigating this,
yes.
Only one of whom, I believe, was Jewish. Most of them were not.
Yes.
Does it surprise you that they didn't wait for that commission inquiry that's now underway from the Equalities Commission and give their evidence to them? Because the Labour Party says tonight they were politically motivated and has implied that that's what they should have done if they were interested in getting a serious answer to their complaints.
It didn't surprise me on the basis of their testimony. I noticed that with maybe two exceptions, they'd all been employed from about 2016 onwards. So they had come after there'd been the change in the leadership. One of them said, oh, we were treated like we were Blairites, but they'd all been instated long after Tony Blair had left. It wasn't surprising, because the way that they were talking, they were describing a very dysfunctional system that was causing both the Jewish members of the party upset, but also themselves. We saw quite a lot of testimony in the thing about how bad it was to be working in the party.
Briefly, I've got two more questions. No, not at all. But I'm sorry to have to rush it. It's an important issue. But two more quick points. The Labour Party says this is 0.06% of the party membership that comes under the ambit of these accusations of anti-Semitism. It's tiny. One is too many. But do you think that's a fair point, that it is a very small percentage?
I think it's probably a small percentage, but I think the numbers, there'll be a significant number of people who are anti-Semitic in the Labour Party, and you can see that from social media.
Is it thousands?
It might be thousands, yes. I mean, there's 500,000 members of the Labour Party. A quite small percentage of that is quite a large number.
And what does this leave you feeling or thinking about the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, I think the Labour Party as a whole, but particularly the leadership, has absolutely got to change gear in a way.
But should he go?
No. I'm not saying that. He's got to change gear in relation to anti-Semitism. There's got to be visible change.
Thank you very much, Lord Faulkner.